We are back at Randyland here with the wonderful world of Randy and the amazing collection of Main Street Randyland. And you know, I was going to tell the story of when I was a little Randy, just a little Randy. And I grew up basically on the boardwalk in Seaside Heights. That was our main focal point because we had a summer house in Lavalette, which was just north a little bit from Seaside. So my parents took us to the boardwalk all the time. Every day. If we missed a day on the boardwalk, somebody was sick all summer long. That was just our deal. My parents were so good to us, and they gave us plenty of money to play games. We weren't the kids that walked along and just got to look at something because Dad said, oh, look at this or anything like that. We was constantly getting us changed to play the games, and thank God for that because they gave me the love and the appreciation for the things that I have today that I preserved. So I preserved a way of life that I knew and loved. And one of the places that had the most amazing machines was the Carousel Arcade in Seaside Heights. It was the last street or so in Seaside Heights before it actually became Seaside Park, which the boardwalk continued down a little bit further. But there were two main arcades on the boardwalk that had merry-go-rounds inside them. One was at Casino Pier, was the Casino Arcade, which was also a great arcade. But the one at the south side was the Carousel Arcade, and it had its merry-go-round, but they always seemed to have the really most neat machines, even when I was a little kid. They were really amazing. They had older games, but it didn't matter because they were fantastic. And they had a mechanic who worked there, who was one of the partners of the owners. They had three owners. And the mechanic, his name was Lou Capetta. And my mom used to always talk to Lou because he was very personable. And I used to watch him walk around with his tool belt to his, his tool case on the side of his belt and all that. And I would be kind of fascinated about him. I'd watch him working on a machine. I was little, I didn't know much, but I always was kind of fascinated about that. Little did I know. But they had special machines because of the ability of repairing them that Lou Capetta had. And a lot of the arcades were based upon the ability of their mechanic. If you had a good mechanic who was special and he knew how to handle the machines lived. They lived on. And he was one of the few that was very good at it, and the machines lived on. So one of the interesting machines that I played when I was really, really little were the capital drive testing machines. Now you'd say to yourself, well, capital drive testing machines. Well, everybody knows today when you sit down at the driving machine, and it's a video screen, and it's very intricate with the graphics, and you got to turn, and sometimes even the seats move, and you got the music playing through the big woofers underneath the seats, so the vibration, and you feel it. And they're all great, and they're wonderful. And some of them today have even gone to the extreme of simulators where the whole seat is hydraulically moved or has little motors that move it back and forth or vibrates to make you feel like you're driving it. And that's really cool, and that's really nice. But we didn't have that stuff back then. We had something even better: our imagination. So we could immerse ourselves into the machine vicariously by seeing what's happening and just be part of the images that were really, really neat. So without the advent of TV monitors, what did they use? They used projections. And Capitol, which was not a huge company compared to some of the companies like Bally and Williams that were making games, used actual film to run on projectors inside the machine. Interestingly enough, Capitol also made peep shows, very risque stuff, where they were usually hidden someplace, not even like in New York. The Carousel Arcade, a very family place on the boardwalk in Seaside, in the 60s, had an area in the back corner by the ski balls that it looked like it was a junk corner because, you just saw like junk around it. And there was like one little space of an opening between the machines, and people would slip in and out there. So you'd wonder, what were they doing? So one time I snuck in there to see, and I saw these older guys, teenagers, whatever, looking into this machine like this, and they were peep shows showing dirty movies. Can you imagine? Fortunately, I was little. I couldn't even get up that high to see, and they didn't have any little step stools to see into the thing. But, but you got to remember, I have some of those peep show machines, but, I can tell you the films are not really that risque. Some of the ones from the 70s and the 80s, now you're talking, they went over the line. But the early ones, they had these really old ones from the 50s and the early 60s. You know, the women who were on the film, they're wearing two-piece bathing suits, which was outrageous because nobody was allowed to wear a two-piece bathing suit. You had to wear a one-piece bathing suit. But they weren't showing anything. I mean, what you see on the boardwalk today is like, you know, two Band-Aids and a cork. You know, compared to what they had back then, you might as well be dressed for formal dinner the way they were showing it, you know, back in that day. But Capitol, because of the peep shows, had developed a continuous loop film system, which they used the same system to make the Capitol drive testing machines. Isn't that interesting? So I think the peep shows came first, and then they made the drive testers, but it's really neat. And here they are up here. These are the very ones that I rode in when I was a little tyke in the 60s. Now, these are probably from very early 60. I'm going to guess, without looking it up and going through all kinds of craziness on Wikipedia and all that stuff, I'm going to guess it's 60, 61, maybe 62. They could be 59, but look at the dashboard. You see the dashboard on the car? That kind of gives you an era of where it was from. And that's definitely late 50s, early 60s dashboard. And they used probably real dashboards from cars at the time. Now, if you see the screen where the monitor is, you see a plastic car. You see that? It looks almost like a little rocket ship, but that's a plastic car. And all the plastic car would do is turn left and right as you turn your steering wheel. So what was on the TV monitor? Nothing. Those are not TV monitors. Those are screens where the projection of the film would appear. And the projection would be an old car with the big old fenders of the 50s, driving along the streets, and you are the driver trying to keep your car on the street along with the same thing of the film. So if you went off the road, the light would light up that you're off the road, and it would affect your scoring. If you stayed on the road, it was fine. You had gas pedal, you had brake pedal. The machine knew if you were using the gas, it knew if you were using the brake. If you didn't use the brake when you were supposed to stop, that would penalize you on your game. So these were almost like going to driving school. And in fact, some driving schools in America used Capitol drive testing machines in their driving school. You can see some old footage of a classroom where they maybe had 25 of these all lined up. The difference was they didn't have the part on the top where you see the map of the country and the top score marquee sign on the top. Those are specifically for the amusement version because as you were playing, your score would advance a light on the roadway that you see and would go across the country. There's two roads side by side, the blue road and the red road. One of those roads would be a pace car. The other would be your car. So it was almost like a timer as the pace car would go along from countryside to countryside. You see it starting in New York and it's going over to California. And the pace car would move along and you would try to beat the pace car or at least keep up with it. In most instances, drivers weren't good enough, so they would fall behind and the pace car would win. But you tuned your driving skills by learning how to drive on the Capitol drive testing machines. Really amazing machines for their day. Probably very, very expensive. I have no idea. But I played them, and I was really too young. I couldn't reach the pedals. I was a little short Randy, and I couldn't reach the pedals. So I did my best. I didn't care. And you know what? They were a dime, one thin dime. And, you know, I was playing pinballs and skee balls at that time were a nickel. So that was a lot of money. A dime was twice the cost of a skee ball machine. Today, skee ball in many places is $1. At my retro arcade, I run them at a quarter, sometimes 50 cents. So if it was $1 and this is a dime compared to a nickel, that would be a $2 play. And a lot of racing car games today you see on the boardwalk are $2 or more. They got one this year that came out that has the seat that moves. It's $5 a game, $5, and people play it. But you know what? The machine, you got to buy two of them because they're linked, and they cost $58,000. So of course they're charging $5 a play. I don't know what the Capital Drive testers cost back in 1960, but I'm sure it was several thousands of dollars, and money being different, that several $1,000s is probably worth tens of thousands of dollars today in pro rata form. So that dime today would be nothing, but the dime back then was substantial in order to pay for the use. But they had them for years. Why? Because of Lou Capetta, the mechanic, who was able to keep them going. How did I end up with them? How? Because I cared. I'm the one who cares. Other people put their dimes in it, they played it, they enjoyed it, they walked on. Me, they made solid memories. The machines were my friends. I held on to those memories. And many years later, as a teenager, I got to be working in arcades as an arcade mechanic, and I fixed games for different arcades. And I fixed many games for the Carousel arcade. Well, at that time, these games they didn't care about because they weren't making money anymore. The new video games were coming out and the new technology. People forgot about the Capital Drive testers and the games of my era. They were being pushed into corners. They were being cannibalized, broken up for parts. They told me to go smash up a machine and take the parts to fix other games. It would be like killing a soul. You can't do that. So instead of paying me, they'd say, well, take the machine home with you this week. You got it. Good deal. So I would come with the station wagon and drag the machine home, drag it across the boardwalk, take it to the garage. Now, the Capital Drive testers are too big for the station wagon. So that involved having to rent a truck and come down there and get them. But there they are. I did it. I worked for it. I paid the money to rent the truck. I went and got it physically, did it. I paid storage because where are you going to put them? They didn't fit in the house. So I've had those machines. Has to be over 35 years, probably closer to 40 plus. So here they are. And even if I don't play them, they're up there on display because I really don't want people to play them. Even if we're open, I don't want people to play them because to replace the parts, it's not possible. What am I going to get? $1 to play the game? I wouldn't be able to pay the money to keep the game running. So I'm happy to know what they are and for people to understand what they are and respect it. It's like the Mona Lisa. You don't mess with it. So there they are. The films are intact inside it. I can make them work. Someday I might get ambitious enough to get the forklift and get them off there and pull them out if I had more space and go through them and make them run again. But I don't have that circumstance right now. I'm tight for space because I'm trying to preserve everything in the manner in which I have. So without the funding of a arts scholarship or something of this nature, an educational scholarship in order to get a giant super Walmart-sized building, I work with the space I have. I have 40 tractor trailers filled with equipment like this that haven't seen the light of day for decades. And they need to come out. They need to be seen. They want to be seen. They want you to learn about them. And hopefully, someday, somehow, we'll be able to do that so that you can experience the arcades of what I experienced back in the day. You might not have had the memory because you weren't born then. I was, and I can tell you that. When I'm not around to tell that story anymore, then it's just an old machine. But it's not. It's so much more, as is all these other things here. It's our history. That's what we're all about. And hopefully through this series, we'll increase that appreciation across the world for people who watch these video series. But you know what? You're going to miss them. You know why? You didn't click the subscribe button, did you? I bet you didn't. So you must go and click subscribe to the Main Street Randyland channel so that you get to see all these treasures. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it again. You missed it then, you're going to miss it now. Click subscribe. Help us along the way in our mission to bring this to America, to bring it to the world, and maybe even to get a giant-sized 200,000 square foot building where all the treasures can live on in the New Jersey State Amusements Museum. Think of that. School trips all year long, every grade level, coming to learn what not only machines were, but the technology that they used, the artwork they used, the way people were, their culture, their foundations, families, lifestyles. All this is told through the way we play. It's a very important mission, and you're part of it right here by watching it. So go click and subscribe. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time for another great adventure of fun stuff at Main Street Randyland.